Alright, welcome back guys. In this video we are going to learn the blur tool, the sharpen tool and the smudge tool inside Photoshop. Let's get started. Alright, out of the other tools inside Photoshop, these are the tools I think don't really share any shortcuts, so we can get to them by going here on the toolbar and clicking on this icon. If you click and hold for a moment, you will see that they fall inside one group, which is a very good thing because these tools are not very helpful in the first place, because there are better ways of doing the same thing other than using these tools. But let me show you how they work. So let's start with the blur tool. And of course, you know that any tool that is selected will have different settings here on the options bar. So what does the blur tool helps you to do? It blurs stuff, okay guys? So right now I'm going to right click even with the blur tool and take the size of my brush up to maybe 183 and say okay. Now with the strength value of 50%, if I were to blur this portion, because my intention is to make sure the lady's face is in focus, so I can just click here to paint around just like so. And that is going to blur away that portion. As you can see guys, that's the main job of the blur tool. But if I take the strength to 100%, notice that if you hover on the word strength, you have this pointing finger with the double-headed arrow. Means you can click and scrub to the right to increase or scrub to the left to decrease. I'm going to take it all the way up to 100, and since the strength is higher right now, we can be able to see the result even faster, just like so. And why I'm doing all these changes, you must have noticed already, we are working destructively because we are working on the original background. Of course, we could make a copy of it, but we will still be working destructively. Why destructive? Because first of all, if I need to go back and modify the blur values right here, first, there is no control, there is no button, there is no option that can enable me to go back and undo the blur I've done, other than pressing Ctrl Z to go back, which is going to undo other steps I've done. So this is why I don't usually find the blur tool very useful in certain scenarios, except for times where you just want to have some quick work done or something like that. So I'll go to File and then choose Revert to revert all my changes. And another alternative to working non-destructively with the blur tool is, first, let us duplicate the background by pressing Ctrl J, and let's click on this icon to hide the original background layer, and let's go ahead and create a new layer above it to have it as layer 2. Now with this new layer selected, if I were to paint on this image with the new layer, nothing is going to happen. Okay guys, because the layer we have currently selected has no pixels, it has no background image, it has nothing in it, it's empty. That is why when using the blur tool and having a new layer like this, you have to make sure sample all layers is checked. With this option check, you can be able to click, just paint around, modify, blur it just the way you want. And as you can see on the layers panel, all the changes we have made appear on this layer. Means we can click on this icon to see the before and after. Okay guys, very helpful. But still yet, I don't recommend working like this, so I'm going to delete this layer. So to be able to make sure that we can adjust the blur, let us start by converting this layer into a smart object. So I'll right click and choose convert to smart object. Now I'm going to go to filter, then blur, then I choose Gaussian blur. Now on the Gaussian blur dialog box, if you enable the preview option here, you can be able to see how it's going to look. Then you can click on this button, the minus and the plus buttons, to either zoom out of the preview window or zoom in. But I think a value of 4.7 pixels looks good, so I'm going to press OK. Now because we converted this layer as a smart object layer, this filter we just apply comes in as a smart filter. And the good thing about this is that we can double click on the name and we can still modify the 4.7 pixel value from here. I think it's good, so let's just leave it like that. Now another good thing is, by default smart filters come in with the layer mask. So let's make sure the mask is selected. Then since I need to make sure the lady's face is in focus, I can press the B key, okay, to switch to my brush tool. Then I'll right click and increase the size of my brush. Yeah, that is small. Yeah, just like so. And make sure I'm working with a soft round brush, not a harsh brush guys, because if I were to use the harsh brush right now, see what's going to happen. If I click once, you see it is very harsh, it is very sharp, the transition is harsh on this lady's face, which is not what. Of course, you could go to the properties panel and try to modify the marks by increasing the feather and density, but I'm just going to undo that. Right click again and make sure I work with the soft round brush to avoid the hassle, just like so. Now I'm going to paint over the lady's face gradually. As you can see, as we paint, anybody looking at this image is going to focus just on the lady's face. Very beautiful. And as we learned in the previous videos about smart filters, we can click on these icons right here, these two icons, to bring the blending mode. and there is a lot of things, a lot of flexibility, a lot of controls which you have when working like this inside Photoshop other than using the normal blur tool. Okay guys, so this is how you can actually work with the blur tool inside Photoshop, but I always find it very nice for you to be able to convert your layer to a smart object, then apply maybe any type of blur to it so that you can be able to have these controls later on. Now I'm going to go to File, Revert, to set the image back to original because we need to switch to the next tool, which is the Sharpen tool. And again, on the options bar we have the settings relating to that particular tool, and you can also right click and increase the size of their brush just like so. Now from the word sharpen, you know it has to sharpen details. Okay guys, that's what it does. First let's explain this blend mode. Here you can choose to either darken or lighten. So if you choose darken, anything you paint will become darker. So if we try to paint on the eyebrows right here, you see, first we are working non-destructively, and you notice that as I paint over it, it darkens it because the blending mode we are currently using is the darken blend mode. Now I press Ctrl Z to undo that change, and similarly if I choose lighten and we click on the eye, you can see it will become lighter just like so. Okay guys, which is also very destructive. So by default, if you intend to use the Sharpen tool, always stay on the normal mode, and then you adjust things such as the strength. Notice that the strength is set to 50% by default, but you can take it up to 100 or as low as 1% if you need to. So let's say I intend to sharpen this lady's eyes. What I can do is maybe zoom into this image so that you can see what I'm doing, just like so. Now I'm going to grab the Sharpen tool one more time, right click and reduce the size of my brush. Yeah, then I need to make sure I also work non-destructively. So what am I going to do? First, I'll work on a separate layer by clicking on the plus icon here to add a new layer here. Now with the new layer selected, I have to make sure sample all layers is checked, which means anything I do on this layer, Photoshop is going to look at pixels from all the other layers. In this case we have just one layer. So with everything set, I'm just going to paint over the lady's eyes just like so. As I sharpen it, you can see this kind of cool effect, if that's what you are going in for, but I'm not into it. Just want to show you that's what it does. You can sharpen this other one like this as well, just like so. Okay guys, and if I go out, you see it's kind of beautiful with the lady. It's nice, it's a nice effect, but unless you are doing something like this, you might actually go for it. So here's the before and here's the after with the Sharpen tool. And again guys, there is a better way of doing this thing inside Photoshop. So let's delete this layer. First, let's create a background copy of this layer one more time by pressing Ctrl J. Now let's right click and then choose Convert to Smart Object, so that as we are going to apply the Sharpen filter, it will come in as a smart filter. So let's go to Filter, Sharpen, and then choose, of course you can use Sharpen, Shake Reduction, a lot of settings right here. They give you total control over what options you need to sharpen, everything. You can take some time to play over it, just know that they are here. So for now I'm going to select Smart Sharpen, and as you can see, we can control the amount of the sharpening, we can control the radius, we can reduce the noise, and a lot of things, a lot of settings other than what you will get with the normal Sharpen tool inside Photoshop. You can even remove the lens blur, the Gaussian blur, the motion blur if you have a shaky camera. All these things can be adjusted right inside Photoshop. And the cool thing about this dialog box is that if you have maybe adjusted these settings, you can click here on the preset and choose Save Preset, so that next time you can just load a custom preset from there and boom, you are ready to go. Now to see even more options, you can click on Shadows and Highlight. So feel free to play along and discover what this is all about. But the Sharpen tool helps to sharpen details in your subject. That's basically what it does. So I'm just going to click OK, and after a moment of sharpening, you can see the result on the screen. The photograph is sharpened than the way it was. You can also click here to see the before and after. As you can see, everything looks kind of sharper, which I didn't actually do anything. But if for instance, let's say the hair here, you don't intend it to be very sharp the way it is, of course, you know, you can click on the layer marks, and maybe with the brush tool you can press B, and with the soft round brush you can't paint. We'll make sure these portions are not affected, okay guys, and that change will be reflected here in the smart filter marks, just like so. So if you need to keep just this portion here very sharpened, you can't adjust the hair, make sure it is not very sharp, make sure it is not very sharp, and All these details are possible inside Photoshop, especially if you work with Smart Sharpen using the smart filters. Very helpful, guys. So to understand the last tool within this group, in this case which is the smudge tool, I'm going to go to File and revert the image one more time to bring it back to its original state. Now I'm going to click here and hold for a moment and choose the smudge tool. I can right click to increase the size of my brush, and I'll just pick a soft round brush. And again, on the options bar we have the settings relating to the smudge tool. First, it is always a good idea to stay non-destructive, so you can always create a new layer, then make sure sample all layers is checked. Then I'm going to click here and drag to the right to increase the strength up to 100. Then I don't want to work in any blend mode, just the normal one. And the smudge tool, guys, is a tool you are going to use most of the time if you are into photo painting, digital painting and illustrations. It's very helpful. So let us say, for instance, I intend to create like a painting effect of this lady's face. So with all these settings here, what I can simply do is to click. As you see, we can do a lot of changes here, but I think the strength is too much, so I'm going to press Ctrl Z to go back a few times, reduce the strength to maybe 35%, and this time you see we can make the lady's face smoother just with the smudge tool. So if you are into photograph painting, like those guys who paint illustrations from digital photographs, this is the tool you have to use. This is the tool of choice. Of course, you can combine it with other tools such as the pen tool, and you are going to have awesome results. As you can see, guys, we have this kind of painting effect right on this lady's face. And as you can see, guys, the lady's face looks so smooth, and try to create this kind of painting effect right inside Photoshop just with the smudge tool. Of course, there are other tools which you can use in combination to have greater results inside Photoshop, but I think you get the point with all these tools. Okay, guys, so always remember the blur tool is there to blur stuff, the sharpen tool is there to sharpen, and the smudge tool is there to create this kind of effect. Of course, with the blur and sharpen tool, I've shown you the best possible ways you can work non-destructively, especially using something like smart filters and so on. So that was it for this video, and I hope you got value out of it. Kindly support the channel by subscribing and hitting the bell icon. I'm going to see you in the next one shortly. Bye bye.